Experience can make you high, but at the end of a day, rich with experience, you feel heavy, drowsy, like the bee full of honey. Sleep allows you to process your experience through dreams. Just as the bee can't survive without emptying itself of honey, so are you unable to survive without sleep. Thank you guys for tuning in once again with another book review. This week, this episode, we've got OTHERWHERE, a field guide for astral travellers. Continuing the theme from previous episodes of the spirit world, afterlife, where we go when we die, where we go when we sleep, where we dream, is a huge part, and that, I think they tie in, and from all the things I've looked into, from what common sense really would tells you when you start to think about the subject, it all ties in. Now, how it ties in, how we can connect the dots, that's where, you got to look at the sculpture from all sides. You got to, do the research, go digging into the classical text, the spiritual text, the religious stuff, the recent stuff, the channeled stuff, or do the full 360, your own experience as well. So dreaming and sleep is obviously something we all do like a third of our lives, and we just completely overlook it, disregard it, not taught about it in school. Not taught. Doctors don't talk to us about our sleep much, really. That kind of, unless you have issues with it, then they might address it. But it's such an important part of being human. And so, in this episode, we're going to talk about this book. Essentially, recent book written in recent times. I actually found it through an Amazon review from another book that I really enjoyed. I read a guy's review and I, enjoyed or appreciated the guy's review. Clicked on the guy's page. I didn't know you could do this. I just randomly was like, can I click on that? Clicked on the guy, Amazon profile came up, looked, and it showed you the reviews he'd done for other books, and he'd reviewed this book, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting to me, and just cool how things link together. But I really enjoyed this book, which is why I'm sharing it. So obviously it's about astral travel, astral projection. Some people also may have heard of lucid dreaming, though I think they're slightly different things. For those that aren't aware, astral travel is where you can consciously leave your physical body in your spirit body, and you can go around the earth realm, around your house, around your neighborhood, or to the spirit realm. And this is all different discussions with different people's experiences. I know is it Robert Monroe there's the Monroe Institute in America, which this guy references a lot as well. Has done a lot of big digging into that. There's a friend of mine, Jade Shaw, actually, who used to do parkour. I've done some shows and a workshop with her before. She's a big astral projection teacher right now. I've seen she's got a Mind Valley thing. So it's coming into conscious awareness a bit more about astral travel. Lucid dreaming, I think, is more when you're in this sleep state and you become fully aware that you're dreaming, but that you're you, and that you can start to control it. And I think there's definitely some overlap with the whole thing. But yeah, I'm going to be looking at my screen. I've got a lot of notes here about the book and my thoughts on it. And so this book, essentially, it's mostly his stories from his 30, 40 years or so of dreaming. They're not all consciously astral projecting, where he laid down going, I'm going to astral project. A lot of it was he went to sleep, he woke up early, went back to sleep, and it was in those early hours of the morning, I think most of the time, he was able to then astral travel, be aware that he was dreaming, control the direction of his spirit body in the sleep state to where he went to. And it's just his recorded journals of all the stories he wrote down from his journeys into the sleep state, where it was quite apparent it wasn't just dreaming where you're creating the world around you, and it's a reflection of your subconscious mind or your soul, however you want to look at it. That's the dream state. There is this sleep state, and Divine Truth talk about this as well. There's two states of being asleep, of dreaming. One is the dream world, which is your own creations, your own subconscious, as I just referred to, and there's a sleep state where you actually go to the spirit world, or OTHERWHERE, as this guy is calling it, and I'll get into why I think he called it that. But he references the Monroe Institute, references Dante's Inferno and some other books that are on similar theme. But mostly it's accounts of his stories, and they're quite fascinating stories that he went through, that he was able to remember and come back and write down. And so the book It's written in four main parts, and then there's chapters within each of those parts. There's the orientation, a field guide, human zones, and then non-human zones, and then a conclusion at the end. So the part one, the orientation, it kind of sets the tone for the book, and it talks about the importance of translation tables and the words that we use to describe things in the spirit world or in the dream state. It's very important that we sort of choose them wisely, because people have preconceived notions attached to certain words, and I think that is exactly why I called it otherwhere, because if you called it spirit world or dream state or afterlife, something like that, you've already got an idea of what you think the afterlife or something might be. So I think he wanted to come up with another word, otherwhere, which I hadn't heard that word before. It's quite clever. So he's creating his own translation table, kind of like in Egyptian and Greek mythology, they have the same characters but with a different name. So you've got Osiris and Hades, Horus and Apollo, Ra and Helios. Angels and aliens. There are people that think angels and aliens are the same. So it's what your preconceived notion of that word is, of what you expect to see, what your beliefs are, what your educational structure is around certain things. So he was the first chapter is kind of setting the tone, talking, which it was kind of boring, but not that boring. But I understood why he had to do it, because he had to really set the scene before he got into his dreams and explained his dreams. He wanted to help us understand the vocabulary of how to explain it, because if he used certain words, they might just create triggers in your head to a certain belief associated with that word, which can lead you off. So I think he tried to create a whole translation table of words which people don't have associations already with them words. Not that they were new words, but just that they were used in a different context. So he used things like gatekeepers, instructors, facilitators, and overseers for people that he met in the otherwhere, in the dream state, rather than facilitators and gatekeepers. He could get in Egyptian mythology, that gatekeeper might have had a different name that was in the mythology. And so in the second part, he starts to explain the translation table a bit more. Like I said, the gatekeepers, facilitators, overseers. The third part, he goes into, and there's still dreams within all of these. He has these really cool stories of different dreams that relate and inspired that section. Part 3, he talks about the human zone and going into the sleep state and visiting human areas, or areas where humans are, and different kind of realms or spheres. Maybe not so much spheres, probably all in a similar sphere, but different parts and sections of the human zone. And he explains also different sub zones of these places, which is I've not got the full picture in my head from reading it. I have to go over it again, but within an area, say humans can go into this zone, but you're limited to, I guess you could say, your soul condition or your emotional state, and we'll get into that. But so one area he noticed was the simulation zone, where he'd be asleep. He wasn't aware that he was asleep in that moment, and it was a simulation set up to try and trigger him to become aware that he was sleeping, so that then, once he became aware, conscious of that, the facilitators or whoever was guiding it would then allow him to enter a zone with other spirits, which was like a live zone where other things were interacting. So going from the sleep state to the dream state, the dream state to the sleep state, so going from this dream world that he was creating or concocting, or that it was a contained environment for him to realize he was dreaming, then once he was conscious, they would allow him through. And it's explained, simulation zone is a training area in the dream zone for prospective rangers, a gym for the astral body in which graded challenges involving projection skills such as movement styles and correct perception are posed in simulated yet realistic environments that dissolve upon successful completion or repeat in similar form or function until resolved. Simulations are usually guided by an administrator who may or may not be perceptible. So there's one story within that where he was in this tower, at the top of this tower in this room, and there was a sink there and there's a gate, and he thought, I've got to solve this issue. And then he didn't solve it. A guide came and told him, hey, you didn't solve it, you were supposed to realise you were dreaming and you didn't realise you were dreaming, we had to intervene. And then the next time I think he solves it, and then they allowed him through into a different zone. There's the shadow worlds, where he goes to what was, what is, and what will be, which is kind of like the ghost of Christmas, past, present, future. And you can go to your own life. One thing to explain, I guess, is that he is a rare human that has I guess we've all got the ability to get to this skill level in our sleep and in our dream state, and some of us just happen to be better at it than others naturally, I think, because we've not had the emotional injuries to block us from the ability, and he just happens to be one of them. Now, in the human zones, there are spirits or humans that have died and lost their physical body and exist there, and they're going around doing their things to help themselves, heal from traumas from Earth and whatever it is. And so he gets to visit some of these places, and he goes to like a central station and can get on a train to what is, what will be, or he gets on a bus and he goes to what was, and it was a story of his friend and what was for his friend, or he goes to another one and it goes to what is right now. And yeah, the way he depicts the station, he explains, I'm not sure how accurate this bit is, but he explains it as though the station is created by his mind and his expectations, that he grew up in the modern society where he knows train stations and buses, so that's the way that the energy forms itself to appear. Now, I'm not so sure it doesn't just appear that way, but I don't know. But that's one theory. Another part of that is he goes on a tour of the city of Christendom, and he's led on this tour, and this speaks to what I was just saying about how rare his ability to get to that state is, or that position is. He's the only human that's alive on Earth that goes on this tour, and it's one of the most in-depth sections of the book, this tour. It really goes in, and there are other spirits there around, and there's the guide that leads all of them on this tour of this city, and yeah, he's the only one that's a human that's asleep, that's there. Everyone else is there, has passed on from the Earth realm, has let go of the physical body, and is there as spirits just trying to learn and grow. And they're like, oh, we've got a human in our midst today in the group. And it's like, and he can't conceive things and perceive things the way the spirits do, because he's not fully living that life yet. So his perceptions in that realm aren't fully heightened like everyone else. So he asks questions that other people in the group kind of laugh at him for asking those kind of questions, because they're like, it's obvious to them, but because he's human, it's not everything's as obvious, because he's not accustomed to that realm like everyone else that's kind of passed on to there. So there's just some really cool insights into how it potentially works, and how we could potentially go there already, and how few, the rare humans can go there. But if we are able to hone or train this ability, then we could go on these tours of the spirit world before we even go there. And that's potentially what all the history, the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Dante's Inferno alludes to, and all of these historical legacy books and allude to the same thing, that this is just a modern version of that stuff. Then he goes to the non-human zones, and he talks with, this is the fourth part, with dolphins and orcas and a whale, I think. And he speaks to them in what he describes as feel think, and I'll get into explaining feel think later, so it's not just conversing in words. And he explains these as non-human entities, and they appeared as dolphins or orcas. Not that they are dolphins or orcas, but that was just what they would appear because of his inner soul's translation table created them to appear to him in that fashion. Not that they necessarily were, and they, he was swimming around with them, but that was just a representation of his energy swimming with their energy or something. And I find that interesting, whether that is the case or whether he was just, maybe it's just dolphins speak and feel think, Who knows, one day we get to find out, I reckon. Anyway, so the book is fairly choppy between his journeys and his theories about the journeys, but he's fairly humble in his presentation of the theories, and so it's not in any way. Like it does flow fairly nicely, but but the stories are really the highlight for me. And he speaks early on in the book about how you can try to intellectually work on a skill like astral travel, and try to read all the books on techniques of how to do it and practice that. And that might work and does work for some people. But equal to that, it's also good to water, that the plant that your heart's yearning for that ability. And he wanted to create a book in the way that it helped him. He said he learned to astral travel not through reading techniques, but through reading other people's experiences of that. And I think it was Monroe that he was talking about. And so he wanted to write a book similar. And I felt similarly about this. Is like it fed something in me, like a pure desire to work on this ability. Now I've done astral projection, not much and not deeply, but I've done it a few times by accident, where I've got out of my body, and then I've been asleep on my hands, and I've got up and I've walked, and I couldn't move my arms, and I thought I fell through a glass table one time at my friend's house. One time in here, I got up and I wanted to turn and see if I could see my body, and I woke up just before I saw my body, but I could feel my face felt mangled as I was trying to turn around. And I was like, is this my spirit body? Have I got a mangled face? And then I woke up and I was just like lying on my face. And I had a few lucid dream experiences, and sometimes when I'm aware I'm dreaming just enough to be able to fly and go, I can fly, and that's really fun. But not truly to the depth that this guy's, where he's like got these epics, like movie saga events happen in his dreams that he can remember when he comes back. But just reading something like this, I think really, like he alludes to and says that sometimes the best way to learn is not through the intellectual practice of it, but through actually just reading something that stokes that fire within you, for that human ability to appear. When you are reading it, it's because it's a book and it's stories, it's your left and your right hemisphere both kind of working, whereas if you're just trying to learn intellectually, it's going to be just your left hemisphere of your brain working, and it's like something that feeds both and the soul as well. The one bit that I did that I'm not so sure on, or kind of disagree with, I'd say, is there's quite a lot of theory about reincarnation within it, and his experiences with people in the spirit world who are working on helping others to reincarnate. And since hearing Divine Truth's teachings on reincarnation, I have to say I agree with that personally as a belief. It makes more sense to me logically, lovingly. I think there's something. Reincarnation made sense to me in the way they teach it, because I just felt like there was something after, and there's a lot of different, Buddhism and other things, teachings on it. But the whole in the theory for me was, it always felt quite unloving that you don't remember your life when you come back. So you're meant to learn all these lessons, but yet you lose all the memory of the past life. And so I won't go into too much of that story now, but there was always a little hole in that, and Divine Truth have explained it in a way that it makes more sense to me at a deeper level. So I kind of side with my beliefs, which should currently side on that side of it. So and Divine Truth even talk about how it can potentially be damaging to hold the current reincarnation beliefs when you pass, because then you can be misled by spirits, and often a lot of overcloaking of spirits on beings, on young babies when they're born. Overcloaking can appear because of this belief of reincarnation, and beings in the spirit world that think they're helping spirits to become reincarnated, jamming them into bodies when there's already a spirit and a soul there, and this can cause a big issue. Like I said, I don't want to go too far into it. I'm going to leave some links below to some Divine Truth talks on that, because it's really fascinating, and I think it is an important subject to discuss. So that's the one main gripe with the book, was how much, it wasn't loads, but a little bit about reincarnation that I disagree with. So it's not a map as such. It doesn't lay it out like a map of where everything is, but there are other books I've read. I think Gate of Heaven, which I'm currently reading, that had an actual visual map. Spirit Intercourse, which is one I really liked, from 100 years old or so, has got quite a good visual map of the spirit world as well. But this doesn't lay it out like that. But there are other books that do that. Yeah, one thing to note from all my research into the spirit world, the afterlife, when you die, the truth that makes sense to me you don't suddenly get all knowledge, as some people believe. You ascend back into oneness. Some people think you get all knowledge and you know everything. I guess that could be part of the same belief, but it doesn't appear to be that way from anything that I'm learning, from what I feel makes sense, is that you continue to know the same, that you know, have the same personality, and you can continue to learn and grow. And so the encounters with other beings there, people channel spirits and they assume the spirit knows all truth, and it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. And so the encounters he meets with the different spirits in this realm are at different stages of soul development, of an education in love, however you want to term it. And so just because they're talking to him and trying to teach him or sharing information or guiding him doesn't mean that they know all truth and that everything they say is factual and right. So it's just something to know about that as well. Right, on to some quotes. I mean, this is kind of the best bit. I don't know how you guys find someone else reading quotes in a book to you, but this is the cream of the book. This is the best things that as I highlighted them as I went, that motivated, fueled, sparked something in me. That was, I like that quote, or that's feels like a bit of truth, or however you want to deem it. I've had 10 pages once again of quotes to go through, and I decided if you're here, in for a penny, in for a pound, I'm gonna share the ones that I like, and it might make it a longer episode, but we can I can discuss them. And so it's interesting. A lot of these quotes are, you can think of them as channeled, because a lot of them are messages he got from other beings. Now, obviously, how he remembered them, or if he put them into his own words, but their lessons feel like they're channeled from a spirit, essentially, and they are, because he was in the spirit world, got this lesson, brought it back, and wrote it into a book. So it's amazing the similarities in how well worded and precise they feel. But yeah, here we go. And so, firstly, on the importance of dreams. The first step is to realize that your dreams are as essential to your spiritual well-being as are bread and water to your physical well-being. Just as it would be a physical hardship to go a day without bread and water, so it is a spiritual hardship to go a day without remembering your dreams. Why? Because dreams contain as much information about your inner world as the New York Times contains about your outer world. If only you could learn to read them. So I just think that speaks about the importance of dreams, and how, do we give it enough importance? Do we give it credence? Do we remember our dreams? Do we write our dreams down when we wake up? Do we try to tune into the emotion that the dream stimulates in us when we wake up? So another quote on thoughts creating things. One peculiarity of non-physical reality is that thought manifests itself more or less instantly as experience. Anything we conceive appears immediately. Powerful emotional states affect non-physical reality in the same way, though often unconsciously. If I enter non-physical reality while feeling fear, then that emotion may manifest itself as a frightening monster, a creature. I think that just speaks more to kind of the dream state, and how instantly we manifest things in that world. And how this is another quote on how emotions create. I've learned that any unexpressed emotion can appear to me as a creature in non-physical reality. The only way I can avoid encounters with such creatures is to avoid what I feel in physical is to avoid repressing what I feel in physical reality, to acknowledge my feelings, to understand them, and to release or transform them. So this just speaks to the damage of repressing emotions, essentially, and that's one of the biggest lessons in all of this about how to grow and develop in love, is understanding our emotions and learning not to repress them. He's just speaking on how repressing emotions in the dream state causes problems in the dream state. Here's one which I found really interesting, talking about thought pollution in one of the dream zones. Since thought manifests itself instantly as experience out here, we can't have minds wandering all over the place. In OTHERWHERE, randomness of thought creates pollution, very unpleasant for the inhabitants to wade through. So we've confined most of you to the dream zone, where you'll have plenty of opportunity to experience the results of that randomness of thought, your dreams, and perhaps to learn how to free yourselves from it. So I think this speaks to what I was talking about earlier, in if we can learn to control our dreams, control our thoughts, or if they come from through the development of our soul, they come from a purer place, then we can then move on from this kind of controlled environment of the dream zone into the spirit world, into otherwhere, and they'll allow us, because if we go into that place, if we're going into the spirit world with our dream mind, chaos is going on all over the place, and we're just like this human, and the spirits are just like, what the heck, who's let this human out? So there's this contained zone. If you're going to dream and you can't control your thoughts and the craziness of your mind that's bringing in, that we're going to keep you contained in the dream zone over there, keep your mind pollution there. And then when you learn to control it or free yourselves from it, then you can, enter the spirit world as a human in the sleep state. So our ability to control, to be lucid, can control that. And divine truth talk about our actions in the dream world determined by our soul's condition. So emotional injuries that we carry around in this life, they will manifest more strongly in the dream world, and we won't necessarily control what's happening. And so that's one reason a lot of people don't remember their dreams when they wake up, is because their unconscious actions are acted out on behalf of their emotional injuries, which cause them to do, and probably me and many of us, to still do somewhat dark actions that we wouldn't consciously choose to do in this world, but our soul is acting them out because it's driven by that injury to lustful desires and things that you might think in your head, but you're never going to act on it, but the thought is there. In the dream world, you're acting that out. And so sometimes that can be so dark that we just don't remember our dreams because we're acting out. We're going to a dark place of the spirit world and we're acting out darkness, So it can be quite a shock, but again, I'll leave a link below. Divine Truth did a talk on the sleep state and the dream world, so I'll leave that link below. Here's a really cool section. He listed kind of 10 levels of lucidity in dreams, and I just listed a few here that stood out for me. So this is level 3. If you seem to be watching yourself in the dream rather than participating in it, then you achieve level 3. Full participation in the dream action means that you achieve level 4. You've achieved level 5 when the dream plots are long and involved. Then comes level 6, in which colours and sound are especially vivid. Generally speaking, the more detail you recall in a dream, the more awake you were within it. The presence of textures, smells, and tastes indicate the extraordinary degree of wakefulness of level 7. Now, I haven't ever noticed smells as far as I'm aware. Maybe tastes, but I always thought I was making that up when I woke up. I don't know if I've really got to that level, and then it goes on. Then comes the ability to think rationally during dreaming, using mental processes characteristic of the waiting state to solve a problem. That's level 8. I've done that a few times, not often, but occasionally I've been aware there. If you rationally apply the miraculous powers available in the dream state, for example, the ability to fly or to alter your environment at will, then you've achieved level 9. Definitely flown a few times. In level 10, your usual waking consciousness becomes fully present within the dream state. Upon recognizing that you are indeed dreaming, at this point it becomes possible to leave behind the dream zone and enter otherwhere. So I think that's really cool. It just sums up 10 levels. You get to level 10. If you can be fully present, then you can leave the dream zone and go into the spirit world or otherwhere. And so, not really done that yet, but something to aspire to. The ability to generate level 10 dreams, to initiate and sustain lucidity, is a skill. Like all skills, it requires practice. That's what we're here for. He speaks about what worked for him to enter that lucid state. And someone talking to him about it. You discovered that sleeping 6 hours or less, getting up, having something to eat, keeping busy for a couple hours, and then returning to bed can produce level 8 or level 9 dreams, even though you didn't know at the time what to call them. Sleeping longer than 8 hours can also produce this effect. So I thought that was interesting if you wanted a technique. Sleep for 6, get up, eat, and then go back to sleep, and that gets to level 8 or 9. Can't speak for it myself, but yeah. how it speaks on processing trauma. As you know, one stage of the afterlife requires shades to confront memories of even the most difficult circumstances of their recent lives. So shades was something he referred to as people that have recently passed, I think, in his translation table. So as to understand what they have learned from such events, because many shades resist going back into painful memories. They're rewarded each time they do so with a token of sorts. The token symbolises the extent to which their self-awareness has grown as a result of processing their painful emotions or painful memories. So that just speaks on trauma, and when you go to the OTHERWHERE, you can confront and face some of the painful memories, but to be aware you can do that on Earth now, so you don't have to do as much when you get there, or you can, don't have to do any if you could do it all now. But either way, you're going to have to face your painful memories at some point and the traumas of your life, however big or small you may deem them to be. He speaks on meeting dead ones in the sleep state. We don't allow such visits to take place in the dream zone so that the living can learn to distinguish between the dream symbol of a deceased person and the actual presence of that person. Making such distinction is a basic step in learning how to tell the difference between experiences in the dream zone and those in the after-death zone. So there is speaking on the fact that you can visit loved ones who have passed on from Earth in the after-death zone, but you need to learn to distinguish them from the dream zone, where you're dreaming and you create that person to meet them and still see them, but it's your impression of that person. If you can get to the after-death zone, you can actually meet them and interact with them. So it's possible to meet loved ones still and have those relationships continued, if you can get to that skill. Here he speaks on meeting with a council, or someone from the council that in the spirit world speaking to him. Within the council itself, there's no hierarchical order, only the balancing of one function against another, because all functions are equal in their importance to the well-being of humanity. We have no single leader. All of us are at the level of development in which the needs of any lower level are the only important factors to respond to. Among us, there is no politics. So I just thought that was really interesting how it speaks about a council and how it functions, and that they're all equal, there's no single leader. They all care about people at a lower level, not in a hierarchical above or below sense, but just to help people that are, I guess, struggling more than they are, and there's no politics within that. And that's just, to vision that as like that could be possible on Earth if we were mature enough and understood love better, then that's what we could bring back, these kind of the same hierarchy or lack of hierarchy that they have. That's some wisdom from a teacher that he met. This is one of my favourite chapters in the book. Just as the blade of grass yearns to draw in more sunlight, so do you yearn to increase the amount of life force flowing through you. The only way to do that is to expand your capacity to love. Those who embrace life fully grow more quickly. Those who resist it grow more slowly. Less life force is available to the latter. They may be prone to debilitating diseases. Blocking the conversion of life force into love is a sure way to kill yourself. The soul is the source of the life force that keeps every individual on Earth alive. When people refuse to undertake a lesson that the soul requires of them, the amount of life force available to them diminishes. That makes them more susceptible to illness. If they persist in refusing to learn what the soul requires, then they may have so little available life force that they may be able to fend off serious illness or death. And that's something probably many people watching this feel about, just health in general, is if your health is declining, if you've got sickness or an injury in your body, an ailment, that it's always felt like I called it a conversation between me and God, or not necessarily that it's that, but it's God's laws showing you that something is out of balance, out of harmony, and it just speaks to that living in alignment with the soul's truth. If you're not living in alignment with that, sickness, disease and illness is more likely to come. At some point in their lives, most people experience resistance to the lesson the soul requires. Various signals will let them know that the amount of life force available to them is diminishing. If the resistance is slight, they may experience distraction, restlessness, or boredom. If it's an average strength, they'll experience melancholy, depression, or neurotic obsessiveness. If the resistance is extreme, they'll experience cold, flu, chronic illness, or terminal illness. If it's total, then they may experience death. So that just layers that point. So if you've got any, of them that you feel, oh, I'm feeling bored a lot at the moment, or restless, or want to distract myself a lot, then there's some resistance to soul's lessons right now. Now it speaks on satisfaction of life, and I never thought of satisfaction as like a goal if it's done right, obviously, yeah, but it just worded it in a nice way. You, on the other hand, believe that satisfaction is the only success. You choose work that satisfies you. Satisfaction is one of the byproducts of growth, the aftertaste, as it were, of converting large amounts of life force into love. That's true satisfaction, right? Those who believe that satisfaction is the only success are at the center of the human population. They recognize that any special aptitudes, talents, or passionate interests they may have are worthy of development. In developing themselves, they not only grow, but also may produce something of value for others. Life has a purpose for such people, self-actualization, with the goal of rendering service to humanity. Just thought that was nice on, yeah. If you believe in satisfaction is there as a vehicle to drive you to your life's purpose, if it's true satisfaction, right? How it speaks on creativity and the human body, which is something obviously I like to hear about. Exercising creative abilities is the primary manner of converting life force into love. The first type of creativity is physical. Its fruit is the body. The body is beautiful, just as a flower is beautiful, simply because it exists. What you call a beautiful body is culturally determined. The body's true beauty is in its simple, spontaneous pleasure in being, confident that it has a right to exist, unpretentiously aware of its sensual delight it affords itself and other people. The creativity exercised on behalf of the body involves maintaining it by means of a healthy diet, athletic activity, and developing its potential as a vehicle for self-expression and sensual delight. Thus do you convert life force into love of being present in the body. I like that. And I think that speaks to a healthy amount of body awareness, but not the unhealthy, obsessive, addictive commitment to it, which I've definitely, have battled and overshot that line many times, and I'm working to find that yin and yang healthier balance of looking after the body and not pushing it to do crazy feats, It speaks on the soul. This one was really nice. The garden is your life and the soul is its caretaker. For the soul, your life is a work of art. The soul assigns the task of transforming life force into love and storing it in your creative acts. The soul is nurtured by this love. I thought that was really nice. Here's one when he went to either alternate was, is, or could, I think it was what could be. And he visited a friend and he saw his friend's life, what his friend's life could have been, and how it drove him to want to help his friend, but he couldn't necessarily help him, and the guide explained why. You've got to understand that the great irony that governs his life and the lives of so many people is that the source of his bitterness is the frequency with which he tells himself that he's happy the way he is. That's some truth there, eh? There's nothing you or we could do to convince someone who's already telling himself that he's happy that there's an even greater happiness to be gleaned from fulfilling his life's purpose. What he has isn't happiness, it's comfort. And comfort, in the sense of avoiding change, is the greatest enemy of self-realization and therefore of true happiness. I just thought that was such a strong paragraph on how, if you did almost the dangers of just telling yourself you're happy or not being true to the emotions that you actually feel, and that, almost part of the New Age movement of affirmations and love and light and just trying to override the true feelings with this false positiveness, and that you can end up not fulfilling your life purpose because you're telling you're happy where you are when your soul's saying you're not, you need to change something to grow. And you can just end up, you're not happy, you're comfortable. And that's something we can all, lean into a bit more, is the fear of change, of growth, and that the rewards of self-realization, right? Now it spoke a bit on Jesus, the Bible, Christianity, and I'm always interested in hearing these topics from any source really, but from, I've read them from the spirit world, from Jesus himself, from the Bible, from church which I go to, from, a man who astral traveled to the spirit world, looking at the sculpture from all sides. Some of the best minds of the church's early days were occupied with interpreting the words of Christ as they were passed along to his disciples. Unfortunately, the disciples wrote down only what they understood, so the teaching of Jesus is sadly incomplete, leaving so much room for interpretation. And I think that was one of my biggest concerns with only using the Bible as the word of God and the word of Jesus, is it's translated and interpreted by people, and it can only be interpreted by what they understood in those moments, and then translated down through the time. And so that to think that there's not stuff missing that was incredibly important from what Jesus taught, I think that's a disservice to the potential of what Jesus actually taught. And that's where the divine truth, I feel, fills in many of the gaps with Jesus' teachings from the man himself. All of Christ's miraculous visitations to his disciples after his so-called resurrection were in reality astral projection experiences. I think that's just a really interesting thing just to discuss, the resurrection of Jesus. And Jordan Peterson even talks about how important a subject that is to ponder, to think about. If a man can die and recreate himself and resurrect, or however it came about, that changed so much. That's such an important thing to look at. And so to have another source of ideology about that happening, saying that in reality it was an astral projection, or his spirit body appearing, how clairvoyance can see spirits or ghosts or whatever. Was it that? Now, I actually have heard in Divine Truth, and I quickly found the clip just to see what he said about that. He said he was able to manifest, paraphrasing, but a physical body. So I think he did create a physical body. Materialize was the word he used. And I think in other teachings he's shared that at a certain level of spiritual development or soul development in the spirit world, you're able to then do that on earth. I think that's part true. Jesus knows, God knows, some spirits know. I'm just theorizing right now. So this one speaks on, Christianity may not necessarily be the ultimate salvation for the spirit world, or it isn't necessarily the ultimate salvation without soul development. This level of the redemption zone is where most good Christian folk such as you end up. Even the best intentions to live a morally upright life can run afoul of several unfortunate weaknesses in the human character: lust, fear, and control. Now don't get me wrong, these aren't sins in the sense that you'll be damned forever for allowing them to influence your thoughts or actions, but they do interfere with the soul's plans for growth. But on your tour today, you learned that moral rectitude has nothing to do with how faithfully you obeyed religious law while alive. Rather, it's a function of how close you came to fulfilling the soul's plans for your growth, and the extent to which your relationship with the soul was distorted by illusion in the areas of lust, fear, and control. That was as true for the ancient Egyptians as it is for society in which you now live. I thought that's just confirms everything, about, it's not just what you believe intellectually, what your religion is that determines it. It's your ability to work on your soul's growth, which I've probably said 100 times already in this video. But that's the most important thing for determining where you go, and how much redemption, atonement is necessary when you get to the spirit world. The techniques of gaining entrance to otherwhere once were part of every religious tradition. This tradition has been lost to Christianity since the time of the Inquisition. People don't need a church if they can answer the eternal questions for themselves through personal journeys into otherwhere. Such practices threaten the church's power structure and were repressed. Secret societies carried on the tradition but had to disguise it in symbolism to avoid detection by the church. Now there's just so much in that one paragraph that I could do a video on in itself. So I'll try to break it down quickly. Christianity once was about this. The techniques of going there were part of all religions. Buddhism, Hinduism, a lot of the yogic stuff is about being able to astral project and travel. And that, but not that that's the right of the religion, it's just a human ability, and part of the religion was to teach the technique to the human in the way that their culture chose to do that. But if people could answer, potentially it seems at some point in the church's history, well, if people can do that for themselves, they don't need the church. And because power was a big driving factor for many people within that structure, they repressed that as a thing, either took it out of the teachings. Jesus was mediumistic when on earth speaking to spirits, and yet within church today, any speaking to spirits is seen as demon worship, and yet it seems that many churchgoers feel that they have a personal relationship with Jesus, which maybe they do, but maybe some of them as spirits pretending to be Jesus, which they can never question because they present themselves as Jesus and they believe a spirit must always be truthful, which it not necessarily is always truthful. And so now it comes down to this secret societies. So you've got secret societies that are aware of the human's ability to astral project, to have a spirit body, to materialize, to do all this stuff, and it's just kept, secret societies disguise it in symbolism, they flaunt it and tease it in symbolism, but they keep the secrets to themselves, while we're fed the funnel of many religions, or the funnel of scientism, which is its own religion, which is purely materially focused, and there is no spirit or consciousness, and so there's all these funnels that secret societies are there with all the knowledge and all the books and all this stuff, and we're trying to glean it from what I can buy on Amazon and watch on YouTube. But we can get there. You can get there. God made you have the ability to answer all eternal questions within each of us. Has that capacity. God gave us that capacity that can't be taken from us. On artists, I thought it was really nice, a guide talking to him about artists. Arts became their teacher, freeing them from the religious dogmas and social conventions of their times, or helping them understand the true emotional or spiritual meaning behind scenes from the Bible or the rituals of the church. It could be said that the greatest artists took over the role of being God's messengers after the church declared that Jesus was the last of the biblical prophets. Times have changed. Art is no longer seen as a vocation, but as a business. There's nothing wrong with making money as an artist, but nowadays people seem to put more energy into marketing their work or producing what will sell, either to the masses or to the boards who will disseminate grant money, than into developing themselves or their messages. Now, I just thought this was really powerful in making it clear to me that where are true artists always would create art that used mythology or something to hint and allude at truths without just being intellectual about it, through music, through plays, Shakespeare or whatever the classic artistic stuff is, paintings. And so much of that is lost, and today artists, we think of, I guess we've got movies and music as the main two, or TV shows now. The independent films probably did this, and those were some great artists. But now all we've got in cinema is not independent, and it is just what sells, and it's the these crazy CGI movies, which I don't find very entertaining, my personal perspective on that. But that we're just missing art, and that even artists, how many artists, their first album is great, and then they have no good albums after that first album. That's 90%, 95%, more than that of musicians that we probably like. And it's to do with the fact that once the fuel changes for the reason for them making art, I think many of us are quite aware of that. Once your fuel changes for the reasoning, you're trying to impress board members or get money, it just takes away. And then it goes on to speak about what the artist can do. A few artists stumble on the soul's plans for their growth and begin to realise it through their art, ignoring the critics, and eventually saying something that quenches the spiritual thirst of their audience. They may even become widely known because the depth behind their work is glaringly apparent when measured against the glitz and glitter of their peers. If they can remain true to themselves, letting go of the fear of survival that would make them sensitive to pressure from others to deviate from their chosen course and repeat themselves or pander to the masses, if they can avoid the temptation to use their fame to take advantage of others or to seduce their fans, then they have no need to spend time in the lower levels of the redemption zone. Their exemplary life is their redemption. I think he's just speaking to where you could end up in the spirit world if your motivation is purer, let's say, than acting from an emotional injury which makes you want to try to impress and pander to people. You're actually acting on your own soul's desires, and that can help you, when passing over, go to a nicer place and accelerate the process. Here we have a paragraph that speaks on hell in OTHERWHERE. No, little one, it said, there's no such thing as hell here, except for the private hells people create for themselves, from anger, fear, regret, guilt, shame, lust, and self-pity. You see, the after-death zone is a part of non-physical reality, or OTHERWHERE, as we call it. Thought creates experience here. When people who have repressed such emotions die, they experience a kind of hell until these emotions have been discharged. We do our best to help them release themselves from their private hells, but some are more stubborn about punishing themselves than are others. So that again confirms all the other books, all the divine truth teachings, mostly about there's no one hell, but there are the hells which people create for themselves, and though it doesn't say it in this, in other ones it alludes to similar. It says anger, fear, regret, guilt, shame, lust, self-pity. There are others as well. People of similar emotions about similar issues. So if men that are all angry at women may end up they'll be like attracts like, more in that realm. They'll end up in the same part of the hells. It's not one hell, but it's this collective hells of similar emotionally traumatized people. I'm not sure he alludes to a private hell, but there are areas that they go to. But the fact it talks about people who die with repressed emotions, they need to experience the emotions to discharge them. So that, I think, is alluding to some deep truths. Now here's when he talked about meeting the dolphins, which I mentioned earlier. On another visit to the non-human zones, I find myself with 3 astral devas, which I perceived as dolphins. They were projecting towards me a love so pure and intense that I felt as if 1,000 of amps of electricity were running through me. I couldn't think clearly. All I could do was cry. I'd never felt so much love from any human contact. It washed over me in golden waves until I seemed on the verge of losing my sense of identity. In a panic, I tried to remove myself from this onslaught of love, like a desperate swimmer drowning in an undertow. Somehow I achieved a different state of consciousness, in which it became apparent that the onslaught was nothing more than an ordinary astral deva conversation, in which they were trying to include me. I thought that was really cool, because he was speaking about these devas that he used in his translation table, or beings which he perceived as not human, he just happened to swoop in on they were having a normal conversation, and there was so much love between them in that normal conversation that it was too much, it was overwhelming for his human current capacity, for where his soul ability was to be around that much love and be overwhelmed by that much love. And I just think that really confirms that our ability to be overwhelmed emotionally is our ability to allow love in, and that can be love from other humans, from other beings, devas potentially, or from God himself. Imagine, that's just a conversation between some dolphins, and he's so overwhelmed that he's having to try and like panic and leave because we're not used to that much love. But the human soul is capable of being around that and projecting that. Imagine God's love, like, yeah, we've got, for me and many, we've got some shields to break down that we've put that are only on our side and not on the other side. We call our method of communication feel think. These were the dolphins explaining the way they communicate. We're able to project to each other only what we feel about things, yet there's both richness and subtlety in feel think. We can't hear some of the things you say because there's no feeling behind them. That was them saying to him as the human. They couldn't understand him or hear some of the things because there was no emotion to what he was saying, and that just really makes you think about how the conversations we have with each other, how much is just intellect. When you hear someone, sometimes I watch a YouTube video trying to learn some information, Chinese medicine or whatever I'm into at the moment, and there's just no emotion behind what they're sharing, and it makes it so much harder to actually take the information in, doesn't it? I think you can attest to that. And so it makes it so important that there's emotion behind when we share, because it's connection is with the emotion, not just the words. But then also, how often is the emotion that we're sharing true to what we're saying, or what we're saying isn't true to the emotion we're feeling? Because when there's disharmony there, because this might be a capacity that we've all got as humans to communicate through feel think, but we're just stuck in this lower level of communicating with language, which can be quite dead, and again it can be lost in translation because someone else's translation table of a word is different to what you grew up, even in the same culture, and so I just thought, yeah, really interesting to see what is potentially possible, and to contemplate and introspectively think about when we're talking to someone, and are we being fake in we're saying we're acting nice, or this facade of one I'm working on, good guy facade, but when I'm really feeling something different about it and I'm not being true to that. And so when you're acting that kind of level of disharmony, there's no way we're going to have that ability to communicate in such a way as purely and with love present, as to overwhelm someone, not that you'd want to overwhelm someone, but that's how far from that we are. So I think that's a good point to end on. It's a long one from this, but I just thought I'd go in. There's so many nice quotes. I thought I'd just make it longer, and you could take it as more of a podcast format if you wanted. If you've read any books on astral projection, because I'm down to continue exploring this. It's all in that same theme, that the spirit world, afterlife realm. If you can recommend any of the Monroe books or any ones that you've read that are good, I'm definitely down to check some more out. So please drop me recommendations. If you've read this or before, or you're thinking about reading it, or after if you've watched this and you read it, let me know. It'd be cool to know what your thoughts on it are. Yeah, or any classical historical books like Dante's Inferno, or Egyptian Book of the Dead that you're into. That's any parallels with that kind of stuff. I'm currently reading this book. That's the other end of the spectrum. The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine. It's a traditional Chinese medicine, like few thousand-year old book but I'm just getting really into understanding the meridians in the body, and I think there's really something to this stuff, so I'm just kind of diving deep into that. At the same time, I still want to start Dante's comedy, but I'm going to wait for that draw to read that to arise naturally again, because I think it will come in sometime this year. I'm also reading the third book. I've had a bit of a break from it, but I was reading it alongside that OTHERWHERE. But I want to be really focused on it when I take it in. I'm halfway through it in the trilogy of A Soul in Paradise. I'm on the last book, and it's really good. When I'm really into it, there's not much better than reading that. But when I'm not fully motivated or absorbing it, then I don't force myself to read it. But I'm kind of dipping in and out of that. Yeah, if you want to learn more, check out the other book reviews. Check out the podcast on the spirit world if you like any of that stuff. I do intend to make more physical content about the stuff I'm researching at the moment, health, posture, but it's just not been the season right now. with winter, but it's all coming in the next few months. I feel it coming. I'm going to leave links, like I say, to all the things I mentioned. A lot of the Divine Truth talks really so much. When I hear it resonates with me, I'm going to share those links down below as well if you want to check any more things out to cross-reference with all of this stuff that I've shared as well. Thank you for tuning in. Much love. Godspeed.